Alright, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how it is very important to make mistakes in your trading and to try to quote unquote ruin your trading as much as possible, because you making these mistakes and you learning from these mistakes, which is the most important part, that is what is going to get you profitable. Not just studying tons of videos, watching all these different videos, and getting as much knowledge as necessary, as humanly possible, actually, and try to convert that onto the charts. That is a very big misconception that has been portrayed on social media, and it is completely not necessary to gather all these different confluences and all these different strategies and try to combine them into one strategy, into one big strategy where all your confluences are conflicting against each other and makes you unprofitable, and it keeps you at that spot where you're at right now, where you're not seeing consistency in the markets, and you question whether trading is really for you and if you think this is even possible. So this video is just going to be completely raw. It's just going to be me talking about my journey, how I wasn't afraid to make any sort of mistakes, and I wasn't afraid to fail. So if I mess up, then I mess up, but again, it is a raw video, so let's get into it, right? So a little bit about my backstory. When I started trading, I never had this thought in my mind where, okay, there is a possibility that I will go broke. There is a possibility that I will fail. Because when I first started getting into trading, this was actually something that I wanted to do, and I saw that there was no second option. I never saw failure as an option. So for the people that aren't even that far into trading yet, or for the people that haven't even started trading, you have to first ask yourself, is trading really for you? And a good way to find this out is, first, obviously, you go on a paper trading account and you see if you actually want to continue trading long term, and this is a profession that you actually want to do. Once you figure that out, right, once you've maybe paper traded for 2 weeks or a month or however long you feel comfortable, then that is where you actually put real money on the line, right? That is where you go into the eval stage. You go with prop firms, because that is the most cost-effective way and honestly the best way to become profitable. And compared to back then, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, where prop firms weren't even a thing and you just had to trade live capital. So now is actually a really, 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 really great time to start trading, just due to the fact that there are prop firms available that provide capital for very low costs, right? They provide large amounts of capital for very low cost. So yeah, right? First you have to figure out if trading is really for you. Once you figure that out, now you have to actually pull the trigger and trade with prop firms, right? So that's exactly what I did. I paper traded for 1 to 2 weeks. I figured out that this is actually what I want to do. I just love the concept of being able to make money wherever I wanted, right? I could be at the park, where I'm at right now, or I could be at school, or I could be halfway across the world, and I could still be making money just from my laptop or from my phone. And to me, that was really appealing. So that's how I knew that this is what I wanted to do. Now, at that time, I was just paper trading. So now I actually had to put my money where my mouth was, right? So after 2 weeks, literally after 2 weeks, I went straight into evals. And the mindset that I was going into when trading with these evals is, I didn't care if I passed or I failed. I'm not going to lie, I was a very big degen. So whatever I was earning for my job from refereeing basketball games in high school, that was going straight to evals. I didn't hesitate to purchase evals. I didn't hesitate to reset my accounts. There was times where I was resetting my accounts like 5 to 7 times, maybe even 10 times a day. So I'd spend like maybe $500 in a day just on accounts. And yes, I'm not trying to flex this or anything. Like, this is not this is not something to be proud of, right? Like I was spending my weekly paychecks on evals. And looking back at it, that is probably like the most embarrassing thing ever. But there's also a good side to that, right? I'm not saying you guys do the same thing that I do, I completely advise against it. Actually, you should not be spending $500 or like $1,000 in a day on prop firm accounts. It is completely pointless. You're honestly just, you might as well just take that money and donate it to a charity, because you're not going to see any sort of progress. But what I am saying is, don't be afraid to, for example, risk heavy on your evals. Don't be afraid to take that trade. Don't be afraid to execute, because you will learn the most when you make the most mistakes. And again, just to reiterate on this, I'm not saying be a complete degenerate like me. I'm just saying the point I am trying to make here is, do not be afraid to execute, okay? The way you have to look at prop firms they are return on investment opportunities, okay? You are spending $50 on a 50K account, right? Because most of the beginners, they end up, or the most of the new people, or the most of people that have low capital, they will spend their money on $50 accounts, right? The cheapest accounts, which are the 50K accounts with most prop firms. So with these accounts, you are spending $50 to potentially make 10x your investment, right? Even with the activation fee, you're spending at most like $200, right? To potentially get a $500 payout, $1,000 payout, $2,000 payout, $3,000 payout. You know, the return on investment is basically infinite, right? But obviously a realistic return on investment is probably passing that account and getting it to a $1,000 payout, or even a $2,000 payout, or a $1,500 payout. Those are some of the common numbers that you see on a 50K account, right? So just by looking at it from that perspective, you're investing $200 into a single account, and that is a minimum of a 5x return if you get that $1,000 payout, right? All you need to do is get to that $2,000 balance, and you're able to take $1,000 out of the account straight to your bank, right? And what you have to realize is that some of you guys, actually most of you guys, what I've seen from my personal experience by seeing my students go through the same thing, is they're really hesitant to take trades, okay? A setup could look good, right? There could be a valid setup, but it doesn't meet like one little thing, or they just overthink it and think that there's going to be a better setup present, and they're just waiting for that A++++ setup, and they actually end up missing the move. All right? Now, there's a problem with that. Okay? It is good to wait for that very best setup, but the problem with this is that you're on an eval, right? So realistically, you're not trying to spend a lot of time on your evals. Obviously, you're still trying to build a skill, but what you have to realize is that you are spending $50 on an account, right? You're spending $50 on a single account, and you want to get to that funded stage. So it is okay to take less probable setups, but it needs to still correspond with your model. That is one big thing that a lot of people skip over, okay? Just because you're on eval doesn't give you the authority to full port it. It doesn't give you the authority to take shitty setups or just gamble it, okay? You still need to follow your model. You still need to follow your system. But what you have to keep in mind is, if you just wait for that perfect setup, especially on an eval, you are actually not making progress. You think you may be making progress, but in reality, you're just stuck at that same level, right? That same stage. So the good thing about taking a little bit more trades on an eval is that you have more opportunities to learn from, right? You may be taking trades that aren't the best, but what matters the most is that you're learning from these mistakes so you don't repeat them again. And it builds your discretion as well, right? Discretion is a very big thing in the markets. And how are you going to build your discretion if you're not actually executing in real time? You can back test all you want. You can forward test all you want. But if you're not actually executing in real time, you're actually not making any progress at all. Backtesting is good for building data. Backtesting is good for refining your strategy. But all of this doesn't matter if you're afraid to execute in real time. All right? So here's an analogy, okay? For example, when you first started swimming, okay? When you first start swimming, you didn't just hop in the water, right? You didn't just jumped right away in the water and started to swim, right? That's not how you actually start learning how to swim, right? Obviously, you're going to see other people swim first, and then you'll observe their movements, and then you take the step. Once you're educated on how swimming actually works, then you will actually hop in the water and try it out yourself, right? Now, this is the typical thing for everything else in life, right? Even when let's just relate it to sports because it is the easiest thing to relate it to. For example, if you're playing basketball, the best way to learn is obviously by hopping in first, right? But what most people do is that they either watch games played live on television or they watch other people play first before they actually do it themselves, right? It's the same thing with trading. You watch videos first and then you execute, okay? With sports, you watch people play first and then you execute. But although this is good, there is also a small problem with this. If you just keep watching videos on how to swim, or if you just watch other people swim and you think that you just sticking to watching people swim, or you just watching videos on people swimming or like learning how to swim, if you think that's going to translate immediately, right off the bat when you jump in the water, it's not going to translate immediately. You're going to drown, right? And this is where you need to realize that you need to execute, okay? You need to make those mistakes. And it is very good to make those mistakes when you have other people by your side, okay? Again, if you jump in the water by yourself after watching videos on how to swim, the chances of you actually learning how to swim right off the bat when you first jump in the water by yourself is probably very minimal, right? You're probably going to drown. Again, when you're trading, the best way to learn is having somebody by your side that's able to actually monitor you and give you feedback on your trades and help you understand why a trade was good and why a trade is bad. And of course, not every trade is going to have some sort of explanation of why the trade ended up losing, because you can't win every single one of your trades, right? But especially in the beginner stage where you're making just unforced errors, right? You're just making unforced mistakes where they can easily be prevented, right? You're taking losses that can easily be avoidable. Somebody there to be by your side and giving you constructive criticism and constructive feedback will help you get to that profitable stage much faster than you trying to figure it out on your own, right? There's a reason why there's coaches, there's a reason why there's mentors, there's a reason why there's people that are there that are able to help you along your journey, right? And it's the same thing with swimming. Like, I'll go back to swimming again. I'll go back to the whole sports related analogy, right? When I learned how to swim, when you learned how to swim, you had somebody by your side. You had an instructor or you had your parents there by your side to make sure that you don't get hurt, right? And with trading, again, back to the same thing, you have somebody by your side to make sure that you don't lose a lot of money and to make sure that you don't end up going into debt. All right, back to what I was saying. My camera ended up cutting out because my camera ended up overheating. But back to what I was saying is you want to make sure you have somebody there by your side so you don't end up going into debt, right? And this is very, very possible in trading, by the way, and it happens to a lot of people. And realistically, overall, right, trading is a zero-sum game, right? So that means that over time, there is a possibility where even if you're up, you're going to end up going back down to zero if your strategy isn't profitable for a long period of time, right? So that is why they say trading is a zero-sum game. And what I've learned from my experience with, my journey to becoming profitable is, again, right, going back on not being afraid to mistakes. I genuinely did not give a fuck if I went broke, okay? I didn't have that possibility in my mind at all, right? Because I had to make this work, okay? I've spent so much money, I've invested so much of my time and my money into this that there was no possible way that this wouldn't work. And I had to make sure that that was going to happen, right? And that's what actually again, that is what actually built me to the stage where I'm at, because I was executing, right? I wasn't afraid to take trades. I wasn't afraid to make mistakes, and I was able to learn from these mistakes. Now, how are you able to effectively learn from these mistakes? You need to have a journal. That is the most important part of trading. Especially when you're unprofitable, you need to be journaling every single day without fail. You also need to be back testing every single day without fail. I'm telling you, the more time you put into the charts, not actually in the live time markets, but outside of trading live, putting more time into back testing, where you're actually actively applying yourself, and you're not just taking trades for the fun of it. You're genuinely collecting data, right? You're genuinely trying to refine your edge or/slash develop your edge to the point where you're consistently able to execute without having that thought in the back of your mind where, okay, this setup doesn't look that great, I'm not going to take it. Even though you've seen those trades been executed on through backtesting multiple times over and over again, right? That is a sign that you haven't either backtested enough or you're just too afraid of going broke, right? You have two options. It's either you're very, very low on money and you need to take the best quality trades, or you feel like you need to take the best quality trades, because if you don't, you're going to end up losing the account, all right? And if you're in that position, then you should not even be trading at all. I promise you, it'll make it so much more harder trading when you have like $100 to your name or $200 to your name, and you need to pass this last account and get a payout. Otherwise, it's completely over for you. If you're in that situation right now, please go find work. Please genuinely go find work, get a job, earn some money, save some money, and then go back once you have $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 to your name. You can definitely make trading work with $500 to your name, but again, you have to be a little bit more conservative. It will cause you to be a little bit more conservative, and you still have to have that thought process where, okay, I'm not going to go broke. Okay, if I make a mistake, it is okay, because at the end of the day, I'm spending $50 on an account, and that is not that big of a deal, because again, you're looking at the return on investment. Once you do become profitable, you are going to be making 10 times, 5 times, 20 times the amount of money that you're actually putting into these prop firms. That is what your end goal should be, right? That is everybody's end goal, obviously. But you have to think in that mindset already that, okay, I already know how to trade, right? I've already seen the results through backtesting. All I need to do is take the same exact trades that I was while I was backtesting on the live markets. And it should be no different, okay? It should be no different. There should be no sort of discrepancy at all. All right? You have to realize that. And another thing that I wanted to say is, again, back to you making more mistakes, right? Or actually, no, back to journaling, all right? Journaling your trades. How does this help, okay? If you're just journaling your trades flat out and you're not actually reflecting on your journal, bro, you're not going to see any progress. What makes you think that you're actually going to see progress in your trading, even though you think you're journaling, even though you're showing up every day? What makes you think you're actually going to see real progress if you're not actually reflecting on your journal and you're not actually applying yourself in the markets every day? If you show up every day and you think that you're making progress just because you wake up at 9:30 in the morning or 9 a.m. in the morning or 8:30 in the morning, and you have this whole morning routine where you get up, you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you read a book, you read some sort of psychology book like Trading in the Zone, and you get your mind right for the charts, and at the end of the day, you still end up taking shitty trades, or you're afraid to execute, what progress are you actually making? You need to get out of this mindset where I only need to take the best of the best quality trades on an eval, right? Save that for the funded accounts, save that for the express accounts. But on an eval, and especially when you're unprofitable, your main focus is to actually make mistakes that you can learn from, all right? Your goal isn't to sit on the sidelines and wait to execute and be afraid to execute and wait for that perfect setup that forms like once a month where all the stars end up aligning and, you know, I don't know, just everything is just absolutely perfect in your life to take a trade. And you're not actually learning a lot from it, right? You may end up winning that trade, or you may end up thinking, wow, I stayed disciplined for a whole month. I didn't take a trade for a whole month, and I perfectly executed when the time was right. But at the end of the day, you're up like $500 on your eval. So what progress have you actually made from when you first bought the eval to when you took that trade maybe 3 weeks later? All right? You need to, again, I will say this again and again and again. You need to make mistakes in order to become profitable. You need to make mistakes and learn from your mistakes, right? And that is all done through journaling. That is all done through backtesting. Maybe you've seen these trades that you've taken in real time and you've seen it appear during backtesting, one of your backtesting sessions again, and then you think in your mind, oh, I saw that I took this trade before, right? So I'm not going to take this trade again, and even if it's backtesting, I'm not going to take this trade in this backtesting session because I know that it's lost a lot of times, right? And it's the same thing with having a mentor, all right? I truly, strongly believe it is very, very important to have a mentor in something as rigorous as trading, all right? Me personally, I had a mentor, and I'm just saying this from my own experience. It was the best thing that I ever did, right? Because I have somebody that is way more experienced than me and has way more market experience or way more time on the charts than me to give me actual feedback on the trades that I'm taking. And I'm able to go to my mentor whenever I want, right? And talk to him about my trading, right? And this gives me a positive reinforcement in my mind that, okay, I'm making these mistakes. I'm learning from my mistakes because I'm actually talking to my mentor about it, right? I'm talking to my teacher about it. And I know that next time I probably won't take a trade like this because my mentor told me, and I've learned from my own experiences as well through backtesting, that this trade is not high probability, right? Is not a high probability trade. And what does this eventually end up doing? When you keep stacking up these journal entries, when you keep stacking up these discussions with your mentor, this eventually leads to you making less mistakes and taking higher probability trades. Instead of you just waiting for that one blue moon setup, right? Once in a blue moon setup where all the stars align and you see this absolutely perfect setup that you take, and you think you're doing a good thing by remaining disciplined and not by taking any sort of trades. But in reality, you're doing all of this just to be up $500 on your eval, and you don't really have anything else to show for it beside the fact that you waited so long to take that one perfect setup, right? Again, circling back to the main point that I made in the start of the video. Don't be a fucking degenerate, all right? Don't go and spend $500, $1,000 a day or even in a week on evals, okay? You can still take your time with your evals and still see progress, but it doesn't have to be a situation where you're barely executing and you're just sticking on the sidelines most of the time waiting for that perfect setup, okay? You can be a little bit more risk on your evals. And again, don't be afraid to go broke. Don't be afraid to lose your account, right? Because again, you're not spending a lot of money on these accounts. It is simply a return on investment game. All right. So with that being said, that is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I don't want to ramble too long. I feel like I've been circling over the same points again and again, but there is a reason for that because I really want to instill this into your head that you are trading evals, right? You are trying to get them passed, and it is okay to be a little bit more quote unquote relaxed with trading evals, but again, sticking to your model, right? Again, you're taking maybe a little bit less probable trades in order to get your eval passed, but you're still learning from it. And that is what matters the most, especially when you're in that unprofitable stage, okay? So don't be afraid to fuck up your own trading. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to go through trial and error, because I promise that if you stick on the sidelines, you will not see progress in your trading at all, right? You may think that you're seeing progress, or you may think that you're remaining disciplined, but if you're so afraid to make mistakes that is actually harming you, then it is benefiting you. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys were able to learn something from this. And if you want to join my Discord, I'll leave it in the description below, so go check that out. But yeah, guys, stay blessed, and I hope your trading ends up going well.